Hello and welcome to the latest Forestry Journal Forestry Briefing. I'm editor John McNee and I'm joined as always by deputy editor Jack Haugh, and we're recording in these beautiful broadleaf woodlands to bring you a discussion on the latest topics hitting the headlines in the world of forestry. Our sponsor today is silt sump. That's silt sump. The topic of water pollution on forestry sites is under discussed, but it is a keen problem, and silt sump offers a range of bespoke solutions for silt management on areas where water pollution is a problem. I'm thinking, of course, of busy harvesting sites and forest road construction operations. We intend to visit manufacturer RDK Environmental in a short while to bring you a full exploration of what silt sump does. But in the meantime, if you're keen to learn more, you can check out the description down below this video and visit siltsump.co.uk.
Can you believe you did that in one take?
Yes. Now, what were we planning to discuss? Remind me, Jack. What was our top story to be under discussion today?
Well, it is a Forestry Journal, Forestry Briefing, and it's a new month, so of course...
Oh, well, I could probably guess, from considering the last few episodes we've been discussing.
Pretty much since we launched this briefing, I think almost, if not every month, every second month, the main topic has been IPS topographers, and namely, more specifically, pretty big news that came out in England earlier this week, and it's actually come into force today as we're recording this briefing, that as a result of outbreaks of IPS in England, the planting of spruce trees has now been banned in several counties in England. So these are measures that are being brought into force by the Forestry Commission, essentially in a bid to, well, from their kind of reading, and we will paraphrase a wee bit, but essentially to slow down the spread of IPS, which, as you probably remember if you've tuned into these briefings, read any of the magazine, been on the Forestry Commission website, you'll notice is started in Kent and is slowly working its way up the east side of England.
I believe it was discovered in 2018 in England,
Right,
after making its way across swathes of Europe and decimating countless hectares of forestry over there. And since 2018, while everyone has been doing their best to remain calm, as well they should, we have been watching and waiting for this news that it was going to establish itself and begin to spread, really, which it appears to be doing. Is that fair to say?
I think that's fair to say, and I suppose it would depend who you speak to, people, whether that's still the official line, but I think it is fair to say, and when this news was announced at the start of the month, and as I say, just maybe to underline that again, what's happening is, for commercial purposes, you can no longer plant spruce in large areas of England. Now that's within the already established demarcated area, which covers counties such as Kent, West Sussex, Norfolk, East Anglia, I believe, as well. But anyway, it's a large kind of portion of the UK. You can no longer plant spruce. What does that mean, though? What does it mean for commercial forestry? What does it mean in terms of the species they can plant? That is quite the interesting question.
I think the big question is, why have they done this? Why have they imposed this? And I think many people would extrapolate from the news that the big concern, because there's not a huge amount of spruce planting happening in those parts of England anyway. There is some Norway spruce, which we'll get to, but the commercial forestry in the UK is fairly dominated by Sitka spruce, particularly in Scotland, and but there's also some in the north of England and some in Wales as well, I believe. And the concern for many years has always been what would happen if the Ips topographus beetle, which until now has shown no inclination to attack and feed on Sitka spruce, if it suddenly showed an inclination towards that species, commercial forestry in the UK would, fairly, it seems, inevitably be decimated.
Yeah, certainly where we're standing right now.
Yeah, and I think we have, in the last, we've probably discussed it on one of our previous episodes, I think, we have seen some evidence of Sitka coming under attack, have we not?
We have, yeah, and this actually was one of the main topics in last month's briefing. Again, the old IPS theme, but yeah, so recently this came out, I believe in July, maybe in August, but anyway, within the last few months, Forestry Commission confirmed that for the first time, IPS had been found having attacked Sitka spruce. Now, there's a few caveats. One, it was not healthy Sitka spruce. Two, it wasn't a kind of majority Sitka spruce woodland. It was next to Norway spruce, if memory serves right, which is, as you kind of alluded to there, the kind of dominant spruce species in that part of the world. But yeah, so it's not necessarily healthy spruce trees that attacks, but it's ones which aren't healthy. Now that kind of feeds into a lot of big issues in forestry. Do we manage our trees in the right way, etc., etc.? Do we manage our woodlands, etc., etc.? But bottom line is, there now seems to be tangible evidence that in the right circumstances, now they are limited, but in the right circumstances, IPS can attack Sitka. As you say, John, that can be potentially catastrophic. It's certainly where we stand now. There are efforts to move away from Sitka domination. You know, the most recent UK forestry standard has reduced the single species you can have in a certain woodland, but as it stands here now, what's been planted, what was planted 30 years ago, what we're harvesting now, Sitka as the dominant species now. The measures that the FC has brought in, as we all understand it, is an attempt to try and, you know, really kind of thinking big picture, to really keep IPS where it is. So, as you again I think alluded to, it's generally in the southeast of England. However, we have had, and this was again from the last month, we've had our first finding of IPS in Wales, which NRW, Natural Resources Wales, says it was found, quelled, stopped pretty quickly. And we also had last year a finding in Scotland. Now that wasn't they called it a one-off case. It was actually two instances, but one-off case where the kind of official line is that the bug hitchhiked its way to Scotland. But I think there are a few things which a few questions are always in our mind when we're talking about IPS, when we're looking at the official reaction to it, we're looking at the official explanations. And one thing which is over the last few days I've been chewing on, and maybe by the time you watch this it'll have happened, but we're trying to arrange an interview with someone at the FC to talk about this. But one question which comes to my mind is that the official explanation for how IPS gets to all these sites is that it flies over from Europe, essentially, or the continent rather. It flies over from the continent, kind of blowover theory, but if that's the case, then surely it follows that it's impossible to eradicate IPS from the UK, because all these cases are individual cases. So the case in East Anglia wasn't anything to do with the case in Kent, so what you do in Kent doesn't actually affect things. So it could just as easily, as the official theory goes, it can just as easily get to East Anglia as it might then get further north. So anyway, that's kind of a question which comes to my mind.
It does make us wonder about the purpose then of reducing spruce planting in those areas. What do they hope to achieve? We have had some comment from the industry reacting to the news. Can you think of any particular people who've commented it?
Well, there's been a few, and I think kind of the wider understanding is that this, even if we have those kind of questions about how likely it actually is to stop IPS spreading if it is blowing over on all these occasions, I think generally there's an acceptance that we do need to try and stop it. We do need to do what we can to try and stop it, whether we're doing the right things. Again, probably not you or I can answer that, but that's a question which we all have. In terms of industry reaction, one kind of prominent voice was John Bruce from Confor. Confor's national manager for England, I believe, kind of former forester at Forestry England. But anyway, very, very much involved in commercial forestry in England, and he welcomed the measures. He said, and I'm going to paraphrase him slightly, but he said that doing this gives us a fighting chance of slowing down the spread of IPS, of potentially keeping it off Sitka for long enough to give us time to come up with a long-term contingency plan, which essentially is what we're kind of all doing. It's contingency. It's not. I don't think eradication is possible. That's my opinion.
That's true. But DEFRA and the Forestry Commission have come in for some criticism for not acting quickly or not taking decisive action when these issues present themselves, and this is the fairly decisive action, one would say, which is going to force foresters across those parts of England to really think about their ideas for what they want to do on those sites. A big question looming now is, if you're not going to plant Norway spruce, what are you going to plant instead? We are effectively sort of sacrificing Norway spruce in England in the hopes of saving Sitka. But if you're not planting Norway, what else can you plant? We've spoken to some people who are considering things like, I think Douglas fir was one, pine under consideration, but pine's not particularly suitable in a lot of these areas.
No. I think, let's be honest, in England, very few conifers get planted like that. That is generally the case, and I think a lot of what we're talking about, the measures are actually to do with our existing population of spruce, trying to take measures, for a long time, the Forestry Commission has been telling people, get rid of spruce on your existing sites, taking that proactive approach. But yeah, in terms of what we plant from there, part of me wonders whether this is just going to essentially is the latest step in what was already happening. You speak to a lot of foresters, and there's been quite a lot of vocal on this, who would say that spruce was on its way out anyway, in that part of the world, even if it's really been planted now. So, that's because of our changing climate, whatever it may be. Spruce wasn't, whichever kind of species it is, spruce wasn't going to be the dominant choice in that area for much longer. Certainly in kind of well-planned, well-thought-out woodlands for the next, 30, 40, 50 years. So, in many ways, all this is a kind of a continuation of what the thinking has been for a while, but it still is pretty big in terms of it's kind of definitive now. As you say, Doug fir is kind of been suggested. I think these are things we do need to ask, and we're hoping we're going to be able to ask the Forestry Commission what is their official recommendation people plant instead. And
if they recommend more broadleafs, what on earth are we going to do about the grey squirrel problem? Because that's not been sorted yet, has it?
No, that's not been sorted. We even then kind of thinking long term, we don't really have
a good commercial broadleaf.
Exactly, we don't have a good commercial broadleaf, but nor do we have a good what's the word I'm looking for? A good avenue for your broadleaves to go down once they've been done, because a lot of the big sawmills don't take broadleaves anymore, or the hardwoods which we're planting in England. So I can't remember the exact numbers. I should have it to hand, but anyway, in terms of what England planted last year, such a small proportion of it was conifer. It was generally dominant broadleaves. So yeah, maybe just worth noticing, before you get into that point, that the ban on spruce planting doesn't apply to Christmas tree growers. However, there are still restrictions. They can only grow them up to
3 metres?
6 feet, 3 metres, make sure I get that right. A 6 metre tree would be massive, so 6 metres.
3 metres?
Yeah, goodness, I get it wrong anyway. My 6 metre Christmas tree, what kind of house do you have there that fits that? But yeah, you can still grow it, but you have that restrictions. Northern fir is generally the dominant species anyway, so...
for Christmas trees?
For Christmas trees, yeah. So how much of an effect that's going to have, we don't really know. And you can still grow them in a nursery setting, again with sort of separate restrictions there too. So it really is the commercial side of things where the ban is pretty much absolute. In fact, I think it is absolute going forward. So yeah, interesting times ahead for spruce.
Yeah, so we would love to discuss more about what people could potentially plant instead of spruce on those sites, and if it was going to be broadleaf, what they would hope to get from it. Instead, it's not going to be just squirrel food or firewood. Yeah, interesting times. And also we have to take into consideration the changing climate and the risk of further pests and diseases with climate change. We have seen another story this week which said that, leaving aside spruce in England, there are plenty of tree species around the world which are under threat. Quite a staggering amount, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, really staggering. I'm going to just load it up here on my phone just so I make sure I get the kind of details right here. But yeah, this is a report which came out literally last night, so it's pretty much fresh as we're reading it. It came out from the UN Biodiversity Summit, COP16, that's been held in Colombia right now. And essentially, a group of scientists, their research has found that more than a third of tree species are facing extinction in the wild. This is the whole world, so I think that the full number was 38%. And that includes species like monkey puzzle in its native South American habitat. Monkey puzzle is my favourite tree, so I'm quite sad to hear that. Ash trees are certainly on the list too. Let's be honest, everyone in the UK or many people working in the tree industry in the UK, no ash is pretty much a goner.
Some oaks as well, I remember.
Yeah,
maples.
Yeah. What else is on the list?
Magnolias.
Yes, magnolias too. So anyway, it's quite.
It's a long list, isn't it?
It's a long list, and I think there's a line from it which I'm going to just read out when I kind of find it again, which really jumped out at me. And it said the number of threatened trees now outweighs all threatened birds, mammals, reptiles and amphibians put together. So it's pretty serious.
Yeah.
It's pretty serious, and obviously one of our big focus on the magazine is the kind of commercial, sort of man or man-made kind of forests, etc. Us actually having a tangible impact on the world, but you still have a lot of wild forests. You still have a lot of trees that grow in a wild setting where they are there for different reasons, and that kind of, I think, shows the challenges which foresters are going to be facing. It's not just foresters, it's not just people doing woodland plans. It's your nursery growers. It's all these. It's people who had to source the seeds. Like there's so many challenges, and I always find this, and the spruce is a great example kind of to home, but this is a good example further wide. If you think about it in a kind of commercial setting, is how do you actually work today for something that's going to be, for the next 50 years? Like how can you predict that?
How can you predict it? Yeah.
Because 30 years ago, when they're planting spruce in the south east of England, Ips wasn't on the picture in England and in the wider UK. Drought wasn't really in the same kind of way that we talk about these things too. So I mean, people might go, 30, 40 years ago, what were they doing? But they were just working with the knowledge they had then, as we are now. And yeah, this, as I say, this is a kind of slightly different. We don't want to conflate the two necessarily to man-made forests to what this is here, but certainly it shows the struggles we have.
I mean, we have to say, I think, that a lot of it is down to man-made destruction, which is a pity. But according to the story, trees are at risk in 192 countries around the world, with clearing land for farming and logging the biggest threat. And in temperate regions, pest and disease, which where have we heard that? Yeah. Which keeps coming back to, and is only going to, as I say, become more acute as the climate changes. Totally. We have had some in the mainstream news. We've had some big worrying stories over the past few weeks. One about I think the carbon sink trees, the world's carbon sink failing to sequester any carbon over the past year, which was a slightly misleading headline. I think it was sort of figures around net carbon. It wasn't like trees suddenly stopped sequestering carbon out of the air, but it was balanced against, the reporting balanced that against trees releasing carbon through typically wildfires and stuff like that. Is the carbon sink failing? People say. Well, I mean, it was a shame the way that it was reported, really, because it makes it sound like planting trees is pointless when, if anything, we need a lot more of them.
Exactly.
Although, if we want to save some of these tree species that we're concerned about going extinct and plant them in different areas around the world, can that even be done when we face such potentially drastic changes in temperature and climate coming in the next few decades? I was just reading yesterday about I think the Atlantic current system and what happens if that potentially slows to a crawl and stops, as it appears that it may be doing. There's an awful lot of different factors that go into, that have to be considered when we consider what tree goes where. Then the question of right tree in the right place is sort of impossible to answer. It was always a bit of a slogan. But now there are so many factors to be considered. How do we know what's the right tree in the right place for the years to come? So yeah, a lot to consider.
Totally.
Yeah.
And then even when we sometimes get the right tree in the right place, is it where you have your external opposition too, so your external critics. So a lot of people would only consider the right tree in the right place would be a native broadleaf. Yeah. And it's like, well, that might have been the right tree 200 years ago. Yeah, pre-ice age perhaps, but not necessarily now. So, yeah, interesting times.
Certainly interesting times. Well, I think we've talked an awful lot about spruce and about some various different tree species, but we should maybe focus lastly on another tree species which has been making the headlines fairly consistently, on in Forestry Journal for the last few years, and that is ash. In the last few weeks, we've had some new guidance released on ash, and I think people have been a bit frustrated with the lack of guidance around the felling of ash over the last few years. Some of the biggest organisations and industry bodies, the guidance they've been putting out has been little more than ash should be felled by mechanical means. And really that's what people have been advised, and a lot of people, a lot of contractors have moved towards mechanical felling of ash, but fair to say a lot of others have not yet. And we continue to see the issues that are caused when hand cutters continue to go out and take diseased ash down, ash suffering from ash dieback by chainsaw. In fact, we've had a few stories lately. One that was I think in our headlines over the past week.
Yeah, and I'm just getting the kind of details again here. Yeah, so now this happened in 2022, but long story short, a forestry worker won't ever walk again. He's paralysed from the stomach down after a tree fell on him when it was felled by another contractor. This was work that was being carried out on ash dieback infected trees on an estate in Salisbury, I believe. And it's pretty devastating when you read kind of the injuries this man suffered. He was 58 then, he's now 61, and it was a 69-foot ash tree, 21 metres, so pretty big. It's many Christmas trees, big going by my measurements. But anyway, so he suffered 8 broken ribs, broken pelvis, 2 broken ankles, a collapsed lung, and internal bleeding, spending 4 months in hospital, and being placed in an induced coma. So, very, very serious. And I should say, just to kind of clarify, the worker was standing in a nearby bridle path, so he wasn't, he was kind of out of the way, but not away as much as his emergency should have been.
And we're hearing about this now because of a court case.
Yeah, so obviously, as you can imagine, the health and safety executive got involved. They probed the incident, and it's on the website, so I won't necessarily read it out here, but the contractor that's behind it has been fined £1,000. He pleaded guilty basically to what happened at Salisbury Magistrates Court, and he's been fined £1,000 in order to pay £1,000 in costs, so £2,000 basically for that. So, I mean, the question some might have is how much of a deterrent is that, kind of going forward, but
yeah, it's not as fines go. It's not going to stick in many people's minds, is it? As the consequences. Although, I mean, you would hope that people will keep in mind the consequences that happen to an individual there, the life-changing injuries sustained.
And it's not the only incident this year either. So
not at all.
It's but I think you're right, and I think this is good. We may be going to this from here, but I think it's so important that we do have proper, correct guidance, because, as you say, many companies, Euroforest being a big one that springs to mind, will not fell ash trees by hand anymore. It's all mechanised ARB, which is the decision they want to make. Some, for whatever reason, whether it's cost, whether it's location of trees, whatever, might still want to do by hand. But we know that's not necessary. If we've got these examples, even our writer, Voice, readers will know, our sawmill insider, he nearly, it wasn't quite as serious as this, but he spent a considerable time in hospital after for a very similar incident.
I mean, the issue with ash is that and the Forestry Contracting Association has just put out some new guidance on, if you're going to tackle ash with a chainsaw, here's the way to do it, which is along with Euroforest, and it's good that they've produced that because it highlights the hidden dangers really associated with ash dieback, that you can be looking at a tree and not be able to tell. Just from examining it from the outside, how far gone it is, how brittle it is, and just recently we've seen some mechanical dismantling of ash, and which you only needed to brush up against it really, and limbs would fall, would crack and fall off.
Happened in what we saw.
Yeah, so even very experienced, knowledgeable hand cutters can be caught out, but mechanical tree felling, there is a cost issue, and there also is an access issues, and there's the fact that ash dieback is affecting so many swaths of the countryside. It's only really taken hold in Scotland in the last few years, and we're just starting to see, I think, trees reaching the same level of hazard. So a lot more dangerous trees, and they need to be brought down. In a lot of cases, they need to be felled for in the interest of public safety. So while we have this period where mechanical ARB is yet to become the standard, we are going to see a lot more people, a lot more arborists and foresters tackling ash with chainsaw. So if they're going to do it, they really need to be very, 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 very careful about how they do it.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's well worth, if you're a hand cutter, or even if not, if you have anything to do with ash, reading that guidance. So the story should, by the time you watch this, the story should be on the website to find that full guidance there. So,
and even the chainsaw guidance from the FCA does state the preferred, method is through mechanical means.
Yeah.
But if there's
if you have to do it,
then follow all of this
exactly.
guidance for the best possible chance of success. And having said that, I think we should maybe round it off there. Another successful episode of the Forestry Briefing.
Well, I'm sure people will tell us whether it's been successful or not.
Please do, yes. Yeah. We've raised a number of questions. We don't have all the answers. And but if you can offer any thoughts of your own, any questions that you want, ask us to ask of the people in charge.
So I should say, hopefully by the time you've watched this, it'll be fully arranged. We are really hoping to get an interview with I don't know necessarily who yet, but someone from the FCA about the spruce planting ban in Ipsen General, to actually put some
Forestry
questions.
Commission.
Yeah, Forestry Commission, yeah. To put some questions to them. So if you do have anything which you think is relevant, please put it in the comments on our YouTube, Facebook, whatever it may be, and we'll try and pick them up.
Mm-hmm. And generally, if you have any of your own thoughts to share about what you're planning to do, what action you're aiming to take regarding any of the different subjects that we've discussed, and if you think there's something that you would like us to discuss on a future Forestry Briefing, do let us know that as well. In the meantime, I want to thank you for joining us. Thank you to our podcast listeners for listening in. Our sponsor again today is Siltsump. Look up siltsump.co.uk for more information. And please do join us again next time on the next Forestry Journal Forestry Briefing.